What is the Smithsonian hiding? Good afternoon. I am Doug Smith, and you're watching Filibusted, and I've got Troy in here with me today, and we are about to have a really fun conversation. Are you ready for this one, Troy?
I am not ready, but let's dive in.
Good. Okay, so in a strange and unpredictable twist of modern American history, President Trump is putting the Smithsonian under review. This comes in anticipation of next year's birthday celebration for America turning 250, and it's being done under the guise of ensuring that the museum aligns with quote unquote American exceptionalism. But what's really going on here? Is this an attempt to rewrite American history, or is there an agenda on the docket that some are missing? It'd be easy to say that this is a racial move by Trump to eliminate some history and, so to speak, whitewash some of our country's darker moments as it relates to slavery and genocide. But what is really happening here? Is there a shadow organization that controls the Smithsonian that's about to be exposed? And if so, what are they hiding? First of all, it's important to note that nothing on this front has actually happened yet. Nothing tangible has happened. It is just a request for materials, okay? But they haven't, as far as I know, haven't been transferred. So no action has been taken. No history has been rewritten. We're still just kind of waiting to see what happens, all right? But the White House has ordered 8 different Smithsonian museums to turn over the material within 30 days. The exact materials requested are not listed anywhere that I can find, but they're generally things related to the anniversary of United States independence and educational materials. So pretty vague. The exact museums are listed, however, and I'm going to run through this list real quick because I think it's interesting. The National Museum of American History, National Museum of Natural History, National Museum of African American History and Culture, National Museum of the American Indian, National Air and Space Museum. We should definitely investigate that one. Smithsonian American Art Museum, National Portrait Gallery, and the Hirshhorn Museum and Sculpture Garden. Those are the ones that are having to hand over materials to the White House to be inspected or whatever they're doing. It appears as though a large part of the purpose behind this is to implement corrections where necessary, a quote from them, and another quote, ensure alignment with the president's directive to celebrate American exceptionalism, remove divisive or partisan narratives, and restore confidence in our shared cultural institutions. The Smithsonian responded, saying that they're going to collaborate constructively with the White House. On the surface, this does seem to get scarily close to rewriting history. And I'm going to throw a quote out here. I want you guys, brownie points to anybody who can tell me where this quote comes from. Those who control the present control the past, and those who control the past control the future. Throw out a comment. Tell me who that is without looking it up, and you get extra brownie points. So the question becomes twofold. Is this an attempt to rewrite history? And do we trust that the Smithsonian has been honest in the first place? What's your gut reaction to that, Troy?
Well, I think unfortunately, a lot of from what I know, and I could be wrong, but I think a lot of what's happening at the Smithsonian does lean more towards the liberal side. And I'm not saying all liberals are like this, but there has been a kind of a woke ideology and agenda over the last several decades. I think starting in the 90s, I would say, to unfortunately kind of it's positive and negative. On one side, it is rewriting history already, and maybe that's what Trump is trying to fix a little bit. But at the same time, I understand that as a culture and as a nation, we not only was slavery, of African Americans and anybody in the world, but slavery specifically in this country of African Americans, huge injustice and morally wrong in every way, should never have happened. But we also did them a disservice and an injustice after that, by not reporting and by not telling the history and not telling their story, and it's because they were not given as much preference and weight and value, sad to say, throughout the decades, even after slavery was abolished. They still had a very long way to go, and so I do respect that side of it. And I would say, I don't want to do anything that walks us backwards in that respect. As a culture, I don't want to remove anything that would take value away from the African American story here in the States. And so I would say that up front. But then also, I know one of the big problem, the big trap is those who have kind of swallowed that woke pill whole. They oftentimes will just justify their point of view to do whatever they want to do without any sort of acknowledgement of what the real history was. For example, it's a lot of people say, well, let's destroy these monuments because they have to do with the Confederacy or whatever. And it's like, well, those monuments themselves are part of history. So maybe we can add context to what we believe now and what should have been believed then about, that, but let's not destroy history for the sake of trying to fix history, So I think that is where when Trump is going in, his administration is going in and looking at the Smithsonian, I would hope that we are able to preserve history, that we're able to treat people with equity and fairly, and that we're able to actually, if things have been warped or distorted by the woke agenda, we're able to fix that as well. So that would be my hope. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And you hit on so many points. And like my actual next sub point here, the whole idea of like, regardless of our history, good, bad, whatever, we need to keep it intact. And we have to remember it because otherwise we're doomed to repeat it. I mean, we might be doomed to repeat it anyway. Who knows? They always say history repeats itself, but we need a little help to not repeat the darkness of our history. It's there. Every country has it. It's not just us. We're not special in that way.
And I listened to a liberal news company this morning reporting on what Trump is doing. And one of the things they said was they quoted that. They said, those who are not aware of history are doomed to repeat it or whatever. They quoted that. And then right after that, they said, and that is why we need to continue removing these monuments. And it was like, I was like, what? Like, you just contradicted you. Like, that makes no sense. Now we should add context to them, and maybe they shouldn't be in the same spot or whatever. Maybe they should be in a museum somewhere. Maybe that would be better than the town square. I agree with that. I think that's fine. Not everyone's going to have that opinion, but at the same time, it's like you want to destroy history and also tell me that don't forget about history. It's like, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, that's a funny one. And I remember watching the video this morning. There's what was it, MSM, the one that you sent me with the guy who's talking. I think it's the head of the Smithsonian now. He was making all the same points, and I couldn't help but think about those statues, which obviously some of those statues represent some racial divide, and that's not cool. But at the same time, it's still history. But he was making the same points that ultra conservatives were making at that time, but for the Smithsonian. So it's like, okay, well, it applies everywhere then. Like, if we want to remember history, we need to remember history. Let's not destroy it.
Right.
But that's assuming that we trust the Smithsonian, though. Coming at it from that angle is like, okay, because the argument here is Trump is going to take our history and rewrite it to suit his opinion. Right. That's kind of like what I'm seeing people responding to in a way. And so that I don't think that that's what's happening. But on the flip side of that, the Smithsonian has probably not been super honest either, in my opinion. So if they're not honest, then we do need an overhaul. We do need some of this history or historical evidence to be reviewed by an independent reviewer of some sort, somebody not connected to the Smithsonian, to point out any flaws that might be there. And
maybe not even connected to the White House, like maybe
that would be ideal, actually.
Maybe the ideal would be to bring somebody else in, or a couple different teams, and say, do they all come to the same conclusion? Like, because then they're going to have that fear of lying, because they know their work is going to be audited as well, and so then maybe that would be the best way to solve it and have the least amount of, public disruption based on it being, Trump's administration that's doing it.
Yeah. So a little disclaimer from me for everybody. I have never been to a Smithsonian museum, so I am not about to claim that what they're doing is false, because I haven't been there to see it for myself, right? And I think that's an important thing to note. However, I don't trust them, and here's why. There's a reason I've never been to a Smithsonian museum, because the Smithsonian is deeply embedded in Freemasonry, and I just have a problem trusting that, period. Here's a couple factual notes. These are, I'm going to throw some like legit facts at you guys real quick. The first Smithsonian Institute in DC was built by a Freemason with an official cornerstone ceremony and everything, like the whole shebang. It's called the Castle. The laying of the cornerstone is celebrated in Washington as a holiday. That's how
Whoa.
serious this is.
Wow.
Smithsonian is the namesake of the founder, James Smithson, who was a Freemason. And that's
Interesting.
just two examples scratching the surface of how deeply embedded the Smithsonian is in the Freemason world. And so that to me is a huge red flag in general. Obviously, it doesn't prove anything because that's a difficult thing to do once you get into the talk of Freemasonry. But to
Yeah,
me,
but
that's
if
not boding well.
for those listening, if you haven't done the deep dive or the research into Freemasonry, it can sound like a good thing on the surface, and especially when people say, well, my uncle was a Freemason, so he was kind of an upstanding person. And I think there are certain levels where good people can still be involved to an extent, and they don't know everything is happening. But if you do the research, there's just so much dark history there and so many dark activities that take place, that it's like it's evil at its core, and it's just not good. It's not a good situation. So now that makes sense why that would raise red flags.
Yeah. And it's not that like every Freemason is doing that. I genuinely believe that there, like you said or suggested, there are levels of Freemasonry. And I think that, your average Freemason, especially, the guy around town in the big red truck with the Freemason sticker on the back, those guys are typically the ones who are just in it for the camaraderie and for doing good things for the community, all that. And that's fine.
But they're probably very unaware of what's actually going on behind closed doors. Like that's probably what's happening. And I mean, I read the personal story of a Christian who became a Freemason because all his mentors were Freemasons, and he kept rising the ranks. And he told the story of, he wrote his story of how the moment that he realized that this was not a Christian organization and they were doing things that were really bad, and he was just and he got out immediately. He was like, suddenly all his preconceptions started crumbling. He was like, this is not what I thought it was, and had to get out. Yeah. And so just very strange, very strange. Yeah.
And that is the foundation of the Smithsonian. So if that doesn't bother you, then there's nothing more to see here. Moving on, you can stick with the we can trust the Smithsonian kind of angle on the story. But if that does bother you, I've got a whole nother point to make. And there are some in the comment section who already very quickly picked up on this next point.
I've seen some of the comments. Yeah.
It's blown up a little bit. I haven't had time to read them, but so this next thing, we are not endorsing this necessarily, but we're just bringing it up as an interesting angle. Okay. Look at this. Get that out of there. Let's talk about the fact that people believe that the Smithsonian is hiding giant skeletons. And that is potentially part of the reason why this whole thing is happening and they are getting in the highlights right now. And I thought this was interesting. This article right here is an actual Republican representative who's questioning the narrative about the Smithsonian. And this just so happened to get published yesterday, right before all of this broke. And I was like,
that's crazy.
That's curious. Like, it's old news in the article, but they just revisited it. And this was published yesterday. And so this guy is legit saying he thinks that the Smithsonian is hiding the bones of Nephilim. And that's a real theory out there.
Yeah, that is interesting. Well, the way the Smithsonian museums work is there are, if y'all have ever seen, like, I think it's the second or third night at the museum, the battle at the Smithsonian or whatever, like you can see, like, they do a visual representation of some of the behind the scenes and the vaults and all that kind of stuff. I think it's like 1/100th or something. It's a very small percentage of all of the artifacts and relics and historical objects that they have are actually on display, and they rotate them. And so there is a massive, kind of like Indiana Jones, the end of Indiana Jones where the Ark of the Covenant goes into that giant storage, and there's just like boxes and boxes for miles. Dude. It's like they have that. The Smithsonian has that. And so most of their relics, most of their objects are actually put away. And so they could have potentially they could have stuff in there that they haven't pulled out for 100 years and that
Yeah.
nobody knows about, and that
Yeah.
is on some sort of list at somewhere, because there's so many. There's just thousands and thousands of things, and they'll rotate through stuff and they'll put it out and then they'll put it away. And so that's
Yeah.
how it works. And they just have, some people have even criticized them, whether you believe they have giant skeletons hidden or not. A lot of people have criticized them, saying, "Hey, a lot of this stuff would do better in other museums. Like, why
Right.
not? Because you're not showing it to the world. That's the point of
Yeah.
a museum. You're not. It's not even just on display. You can't display all of that. Like, just
Yeah.
give it back to the museums you stole it from. Like, come on. A lot of people have criticized them and said that.
Yeah. Are we talking about Baghdad or what?
Yeah.
That's a rabbit trail though. That connected, but
Right.
it's there. But yeah, so it's often dismissed as a big conspiracy theory, right? And the Smithsonian, of course, has come out and said, no, we would never do anything like that. We would never have all kinds of artifacts that we don't want the public to see. Everything is transparent, and there's no such thing as giants, and we don't have their bones. But the accusation from this theory is that they have been collecting all of these bones, and it's actually documented pretty well in alternative media, very, very small alternative media, but dismissed entirely from the mainstream media and labeled as debunked. It's been debunked over and over, right? There are some truth seekers out there who have done a good job of finding this stuff, and I'll let our viewers do their own research on that, which it seems like a large portion of them already have. So,
well, I'll say this for that, Doug, because here's the thing. I know that there's faked giant skeleton evidence out there. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But what they'll do is they'll look at the fakes, they'll look at the scams, they'll look at the hoaxes and say, well, these were hoaxes, and so everything must be, right?
Yeah.
And my pushback is against, like, well, I'm like, well, that didn't work. That argument doesn't work for evolution. Every single missing link up to this point that's been publicly pushed, to support the evolutionist argument has been debunked. Every single one over the last 150 years has eventually been debunked. And so it's like, we still are waiting for the missing link to come. And yet people are still, it's like, how many do we have to debunk? Like, for you to stop saying that these are, you know what I mean? So it's like, that's kind of the thing. It's like, if you're willing to string it along that far, is like, why not string this along as well? That would be my question. Like, have a little bit of consistency there.
That's a great question. Did you have more on that?
No, that was it. I'm just, I think it's interesting. It is interesting. I did a tiny bit of research just on Wikipedia, and it's interesting. And obviously, I have a biblical worldview.
Right.
Genesis, I believe it's like Numbers, Genesis chapter 6. I don't know.
Yeah,
Genesis chapter 6 that talks about the Nephilim and all that. And it's like,
yeah.
Hey, I believe that. I don't require my friends to believe that. Even if they're Christian, if they have a different interpretation of those verses, that's fine. But it's like, but at the same time, it's like, okay, the Smithsonians are the Smithsonian Institute. They're the ones that said, they're the ones that debunked it, right? They're the ones that say, no, this is not real. This is not true. We didn't hide these things, but also if you look at it, they are the ones that debunked all of the theories and all the hoaxes and everything too. So it's like, if you control the narrative and you have access to any evidence there is,
the history,
then you're playing both sides of the table. So it's, I don't know, you're playing both sides of that, whatever. I don't know. I'm getting my analogies mixed up. Both sides of the fence, both sides of the coin. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well,
I've got a personal story for you guys. And this is a fun one. So for those who don't know, I used to live in Nevada, in Reno, Nevada, and there's a famous cave up close to that area, and it's called Lovelock. And I have been there, and it is a weird place. So the myth, quote unquote, goes that in Lovelock there's a cave where there used to be cannibalistic giants. They lived in this cave, and they would attack the natives there, right? And so I went out there and went to the cave and everything. Creepy place, honestly. And I also visited the little home museum that's in Lovelock. So there are two different museums, if I remember correctly. It's been a few years since I've been out there. I was going to pull this up. Here's a fun little article of May Harbor Dark History. So there are two different museums. One of them is in Lovelock, which is still quite a ways away from the cave because it's out in the middle of the dry lake bed. And then the other one is, I believe, in Winnemucca. I visited the one in Lovelock, not the one in Winnemucca. The one in Winnemucca regularly dismisses this theory that giants lived out there, and they say, nope, that never happened. That's we have already proven that wrong, right? But the one in Lovelock was a little different. So I went there after we visited, and they have a very good reputation with the Paiute Indians around the area. And they have gotten the stories from the Native Americans who passed it down through the years saying this was a thing. There were giants in this area and they did attack our people and eat them. And there was evidence that was found of this in the early 1900s. It's even down to the detail where it's like the story goes from the natives that the natives finally trapped the giants in the cave and then blockaded it with flammable material, set it on fire, and killed the giants, right? It was just a small like family of giants there. And the cave actually shows burn marks and all kinds of stuff. Like, and then some of the bones have that same kind of like that you can tell something happened there from the bones. I'm not an archaeologist, so I don't know exactly how that worked. But all this stuff was found and taken out and studied and examined. And supposedly, I remember that there were skulls in this museum. I have seen pictures of them. And so I was going out there because I wanted to see it in real life. I was like, obviously. And so when I went in, I asked the person there about it. And the person got a little nervous and admitted that they used to have something like that, but wouldn't give any details about exactly what it was. And then they said that they just don't keep that kind of thing on display anymore. And so I started treading a little lightly because I could tell that this person was very uncomfortable with me asking about this. And I made a joke about like, oh, Smithsonian breathing down your back or something. And they just laughed it off and would not respond about that. And so I know that the story is not hard evidence. It's not like, smoking gun or anything, but that is my experience with seeing the potential results
Right.
of
But
this
the
kind of
fact that
thing.
I think that story lends some credence to the pressure that the Smithsonian has put on smaller museums.
Yes.
And like they're like, well, we're official. We've got the authority. We're going to come in. We'll take over this now. I mean, it's like all the alien movies. Where it's like
Yeah.
the whatever the FBI comes in or the CIA or whatever. And they're like, we'll take over this crime scene now. And it's
Right.
just like, wait, but wait,
You saw nothing.
don't you see the flying saucer sitting there? Like the public needs to know about this. Like, we'll handle it. We need you to go through this trauma therapy real quick on your way out, and we're going to erase your mind. But, it's like, that's kind of the picture there where it's like, we'll handle this, and it's like, what the heck? Like, what is going on? I mean, that is my question. My question would be, I'm not saying I believe every single story that's out there, but my question would be, is there something actually hidden at the Smithsonian? That would be interesting to find out. I'm curious to see if anything in this like audit that the Trump administration is doing of the Smithsonian, I'm curious to see if any of the relics or artifacts or skeletons or whatever come out of the closet, to use a
good combo of
Yeah, and I'd be curious to see if they find anything they're not expecting to find. So we'll have to wait and see.
I would be curious. I do have one last thought, and then I'll tell everybody who that author was too. Here's my thought. Those who want to manipulate history in a deceptive way typically don't tell you about it first. So if the Trump administration is trying to manipulate history, I would imagine they wouldn't say that. They would just make it happen. But that's a guess. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they would just do it right in front of everybody's faces and be like, deal with it, But that's my opinion. And I didn't see anybody in the comment section. I'm going to scrub through real quick. Nobody got it.
I didn't see one.
All right. So the person who I quoted earlier was George Orwell, author of 1984.
1984.
Yeah.
Nice.
So that's all I got. You have any other closing thoughts on that, Troy?
No, that's it. Yeah, that's all I got. So I just think it's a very curious story. It's one of those things where, it's very similar to the whole Iraq thing where it's like, we're coming in here for your oil or whatever, or for this or that. And it's like, do you have an ulterior motive? Are we going to even find out? I don't know. So,
Probably not. All
anyways,
right,
all right.
guys. Well, thanks for tuning in, everybody, and we'll see you tomorrow.